A very good evening and warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. Welcome to the 6th episode of the Parent-Adolescent project. We have with us today a familiar face, Anagha Pandit. She's been with us before and she's here today again to talk about teenage and emotions. Now, in this entire series, we've been talking about adolescents and the various parenting challenges that we face. We've talked about positive parenting. We've talked about how there are certain superpowers that parents have, which can really empower their, children as well. But teenage still remains an enigma to adults, even though we've all gone through it, right? And I think the absolutely dreaded thing for a parent to hear is when their teenage children say that, oh, you won't understand what I'm going through. I can't talk to you because you will not get it, right? It's different for us. And as a parent myself, that is my biggest nightmare. But thankfully, we have Anagha here today to shed some light on this mystery of teenage emotions and their experience of these very turbulent years. So over to you, Anagha. Let's begin. We will be taking questions from everyone who's watching. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat box. If you are watching us live on Facebook, do feel free to drop your questions in the messages.
Thank you, Debasmita. I must thank Mana once again to touch upon this very, very important topic. And sometimes, I just want to highlight this before we begin because I just came across a poem written by a teenager where she talks about a lot about, how a lot of things that they go through are very easily blamed on the hormones. So I would like to, at the outset, remind everybody that these are, um, adults into basically smaller, relatively smaller bodies. So they feel and think and would want to behave also just like us because somewhere they look at us and they are wanting to imitate us, right? So, having said that, and not belittling all the teen struggles, let us begin. I will share
Right.
my screen right away.
So rightly said, Anagha. Another quote that I've sort of been thinking since we decided to have this is well, I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said that youth is wasted on the young. But that is also such a grown-up perspective, for the youth. It is not all peaches and sunshine. There are real challenges which we often end up trivializing, as did
Yes,
George Bernard Shaw. So
absolutely. So the
let's hear
key,
more about it.
we've at the outset, we've set the context right because empathy is going to be the theme throughout. We've got to empathize with our teenagers, and yes, there are contributing factors like hormonal changes and other things, but they are only contributing factors. So each individual, each teen is different and unique, and we may have to approach them that way. So to begin with, I want to clearly tell all parents who are listening to this right now that undesirable or unhelpful behavior, it could be avoidance, it could be risk taking, it could be anything that you feel is not really very correct, right? Or not really very, very helpful for your teen. But that kind of behavior, which makes you go on a, wild goose chase, um, often results from your teen's struggle to deal with an emotion. It could be any emotion, it could be love, it could be heartbreak, it could be resentment against the parents, and it could be smaller emotions also like frustration, daily hassles, stress related to that, academic pressure, peer pressure, and the emotions that follow all of these usual daily stressors that our teens these days have. So, whatever we see as undesirable as adults, whatever we see as unhelpful or even sometimes self defeating, stems from the child's or the teen's struggle to deal with that particular emotion. For this, for us to be able to understand what is happening with our adolescents, it's important that we understand how the adolescent brain functions. So if you see, there are a few parts of the brain. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritties or the scientific details, but let us just look at it from an overview and understand that the work is in progress here. It's still developing, right? And if I can show you my fist like this, you know, the forearm is the spine, the hind portion is the hind brain, which is responsible predominantly for all emotional reactions, and the frontal portion is the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for all kinds of rationalization, right? And that particular bit is still developing. And therefore, we find that our teens are more involved in risk taking. They get the thrill from such behaviors. They are many a times impulsive and are not able to think through, right, through the consequences before they get into or act upon an impulse. And not so good news, it's going to be still work in progress by the time your 18 turns 20 or 23 or even sometimes 25, right? So, and this um, situation of the brain gets them to do what they do, right? And therefore, we see a lot of teens involving themselves in behaviors which we adults perceive as non helpful or self defeating, right? But for them, they are important. For them, they are the ones that give them the kick, right? I will talk also about a little thing that's present inside of our brains a little later. All right, but do remember this and how the emotional brain and the rational logic based brain, they are different. So the responses come from different areas in the brain, right? And therefore, because of this wiring which is still evolving, we get to see all of these in our teens. Intense emotions. Any emotion is intensely felt, whether it is isolation by peers and the feeling of being ridiculed or the feeling of being left alone or a heartbreak becomes very intense because they feel it very intensely, right? There are meltdowns when things don't go their way, when they don't get their space, when they fight for their privacy, so called, being away from, being away from, not wanting to involve adults around, not wanting to talk to family, risk taking behaviors, impulsive decision making, and rebellious attitude. So now we know that all of these behaviors stem from the growing brain. Let's call it the growing brain. Let's not call it the underdeveloped brain, but let's call it the growing brain because we are moving on towards another level of understanding and perceiving the world around us. Any thoughts, Devismita, here?
No, nothing, just agreement. I think it's helpful for us to understand what exactly happens, why they behave the way they behave. So I guess that's like the first layer that's coming off the mystery of teenage emotions.
I'm sure, I'm sure. So, moving on, I was talking about the little amygdala which is present inside, and it is as naughty as it looks in the picture there, holding a revolver around to the rational brain and saying, I've got you. All right. So, that's what's happening inside the brain. When this amygdala, which is a small portion of your brain right inside, fires, the lid is just off. The whistle of the pressure cooker is just flown away, right? So there's a lot of steam coming out because now the rational brain and the emotional brain are not interacting with each other. And therefore, there's a lot of emotional reasoning that comes out. And as we all know, we should never take decisions when we are angry and when we are in love. And that's what happens with our teens. Yeah. So it is very, they're naturally disposed to not have their rational brain working. And if you can see the two brains on the right side of my slide, when there is high emotion, the higher cortex is completely disabled. And it is impossible for a person to think clearly at that moment. So I think our expectation of you should be responsible. You are 17 and you are 18. And how could you do this? You should have just informed us. You don't have the license. How dare you take your dad's car out? Is just not going to work because we are expecting the rational brain to work at a point when they are high on emotion. Dad's not home. I've got the key. The car's in the garage. Oh, let me just have a go at it, right? This tremendous excitement, and it's not possible. It's now we know that it is anatomically not possible for a teen brain to function in a way that we expect them to function. But does that mean that sense of responsibility cannot be instilled? Definitely not. I've got some good news and some bad news for you guys. The brain is work in progress until 25 years, developing in bits and pieces depending on the experiences that the child gets. But there's also something called as plasticity, because of which, when we expose them to experiences, when we expose them to meaningful conversations, we might just be able to get that connection back. Okay, and we might just be able to equip them with thought patterns, neural associations, which will help them overpower their impulse and become more responsible as they age. But that requires a lot of patience, one, and it also requires us to become their rational brain for them until theirs develops. Am I making sense, Debasmita?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think this is that good news that brings hope for all of us, right? I was also wondering how ironic it is that while your brains are still sort of developing and it's work in progress, as you said, but you are required to make some of life's major decisions during these years,
Absolutely.
right?
How true.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if this is the best time to do that. And no wonder, again, that these career choices that we make mostly, or even academic choices, are probably heavily influenced by our emotions or
Absolutely.
different
Yes.
pressures that they experience, right? But maybe we'll come back to that in a bit, because I think most teenagers and parents struggle with that, right? What now?
Yes.
What next?
Yes. And
What
I
will you
think
do with
that is
life?
absolutely. And that is also a reason why career choices and doing good in whatever, performing good in whatever you're taking up becomes so, important as well as stressful. Because I don't think a teenage brain is equipped enough to take responsibility and ownership of their decisions. And that is why increasingly mentorship programs and career counseling programs are becoming, they are in. That's what is happening, because it's not possible. A lot of us feel that, hamara bas ho gaya. We do not think of it, or we were not as focused, but teens today are much more focused, and therefore they themselves reach out to people who are working in that particular field that they want to make a career in, to understand what's going on. And I think such mentors are extremely essential, so as to lead our youth into meaningful careers which will make them happy individuals, and individuals who constructively contribute to the society as a whole. Very interesting point. Thanks for sharing that, Debasmita. So we're going to look at how to connect the brains. So we've been talking about the two brains. We've also spoken about how high emotion disables the rational portion of the brain. And we've also told parents that we've got to be step in as their rational brain for them. But how to do it? How should we do it, right? So it's important that we connect these two brains by one very important part: respect. It's important that we respect their emotions, respect their needs, respect their time, and respect their um, need of approval from us. As parents, they seek our approval. They may seem to rebel, they may seem to be very upset with us, they may shut us out of their lives. But secretly, somewhere down there, they're still children, and they seek their parents' approval more than anything else. And it is the lack of approval that sometimes sends them into these fits of, anger, frustration, and shutting themselves out. So, family mutual respect is extremely important at this stage. We've also got to respect their emotions and not really continue to say that, it's nothing. When I was your age, I was this. Vito didn't get even this. those are not, those are our woes, not their woes, right? But something that I was not able to do, I am providing for you. You must understand. This is this means translates into, from a teenager's perspective, as I do not have enough respect and my emotions are to be disregarded. All right, which can be very damaging to the relationship that exists between the parent and the child, to the bond that exists between the parent and the child. So then what to do? Reflect, rephrase what they say or what they do. Just give it back to them. Be the mirror. Reflect things back onto the children, onto your teens. Help them understand what you are perceiving of it. If they behave in a particular manner, what is it going to look like? How is it going to reflect on them? And that's what will also help them build their characters, right? I see Debasmita smiling. I'm sure she has a point here, but I'm going to finish this and then come back to you, Debasmita. And the last point is redirect. Redirect, empathize with the emotion, but redirect them to logic again, to rational uh, plans again. So I find a lot of teens who have strong desires and high expectations from themselves. I just met someone who's told me I got a 92%, but I don't think it's good enough. I could have done so much better. And sure enough, he or she would have done so much better. But the fact that, my plan A is not achievable now with 92%. So what's your plan B? And there's no plan B. So here is where the adults need to step in and say, listen, I know you desire to do this, and I'm sure you'll get there. But just in case, what is your just in case plan? Right? So that's how we need to support them when they are going through these stressful years. And I will elaborate more on the redirect strategy maybe a little later. I'll allow Debasmita to say what she wants to.
Thank you for noticing, first of all, Anagha. I know it's always amazing. You're facilitating at the same time. You're so vigilant. Two things actually come to my mind. One is, it's something that you had said in one of our previous conversations, that there needs to be rational support that the parents provide, right? Emotional support and rational support. So here, when you were talking about the redirect, that kind of took me back to that point, and just reminding the viewers that that's also something you can check that out in our second episode. But the other point that I wanted to make is, when we're talking about, it's more of a question actually, when we're talking about the redirect. And as you were saying earlier, that whenever we tell our children that, oh, but हमारे ज़माने में तो ये भी नहीं था और हमने तो ये किया था, it's often, and even today, it's often so that parents try to sort of, pin their own ambitions, their dreams onto their children. And it's the reality of our lives, right? So now my question is that how much of the redirect is in the best interest of the child? Because
Ah,
I, as a parent, might myself be blindsided, right? Where I think that, oh no, becoming a doctor is the best thing for you. So doesn't matter. You didn't score well in music, no, even better. Do medicine. So
yeah, I get you. But
mhm.
you know what I would like to say here? Yes, there is a lot of vicarious living that happens, and we would want our children to achieve what we missed out on in our lives. And that's not completely fair. And that's what I want to tell parents, that it does not matter what you want your child to become. What matters is what your child wants to become. And the rational bit comes in. I want to become a doctor. All right. What is your college? What is your ambition? I want to get into college X. Suppose you don't. What is your plan B? That's how you redirect. You don't redirect your child from one career option to the other, but you know how to get there. What are the various ways of getting there? And just in case we meet failure, we meet disappointment, how do we handle that? Because failure and disappointment is going to create a whole storm of emotions in our teen, and they are going to feel it even more intensely. So how is it that we can step in and prep them up? I'm sure you'll do it. Oh, you're such a, I was talking about this in another session. We very easily label our children, right? तू तो मेरा brave बेटा है, तू तो genius, you are a genius fellow, you will definitely get through. But this is going to add unnecessary pressure, and what you are making your child do is set unrealistic hope and unrealistic expectation. Because your child may be one of the best, one हजारों में एक, लाखों में एक for you. But the hard truth, harsh reality is this, that there's immense competition out there. And sometimes your socio-economic status also can outdo the competition. And that's the harsh reality. And we must be prepared for it. But we do not like, whatever it happens, I am there, you don't worry, I'll ensure that you get admission in that college, is not a very rational response. It is definitely not a very rational response. Have I answered your question, Debasmita? Or have we just moved
No,
away
yes,
from
you
the
have
topic?
beautifully. No, 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 no. I think you have answered it beautifully. That so again, what I gather is that you have to work as a team, and it's not so much plan A versus plan B. It's about helping your child come up with his own plan B,
Absolutely, yes.
right?
And making him, through conversations, through asking the right questions and giving hope. Because, you've got to support that ambition of your child. At the same time, you've got to help him understand that, sometimes things don't go the way we expect them to go. And we
Mm,
need to have a growth mindset to be able to thrive, right?
true.
So if not plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. But I'm not going to, developing the attitude of never giving up, of not looking at a problem as a hurdle or a monster, but looking at a problem or an emotional situation or an adverse situation as an opportunity to learn life skills out of it and move on further in life. I think that is more important. Redirection is in terms of how we are able to make them reconnect to the more practical aspects of life from the emotional reasoning mind space that they are in, if I can call it that.
It's almost as they say, don't teach a child what to think, teach them how to think.
Yes, which reminds me of the Chinese proverb, which I have used a couple of times before, that you don't fish for your children, teach them how to fish for themselves. Right? So that's what we are talking about when we are saying how to connect. Right? And
Very
from
true.
there, this is an acronym. So I hope whatever has not been addressed in slide one can be addressed in this slide. When we redirect, our teams from their emotional mind space, have begun to like this word now, to a space of logic, to a space of more practical navigation through the situation. I would say that these are the things that are our, key takeaways. One is reduce words. We are, adults are famous for giving long, long lectures with heavy words and proverbs and stories and mythological teachings and whatnot. And this is coming from my experience of dealing with adolescents. So, parents, I have nothing against you. I'm also a parent, but this is what children come and say, that we like to speak, we do not like to listen. So, reduce words. Okay? It's important that we nod our heads, say mm-hmm, ahas, and encourage them to finish what they have started. And then maybe, replace that's there later, but replace our reactions, or, uh, pick our words with utmost caution so that our children don't feel rejected, but they feel that we are trying to understand. And the best way of doing this is to begin with, help me understand. I would like to know your perspective on. Okay? Instead of asking what, whys, and hows. Because that seems to turn off our children. I see the Bismita nodding again. Are you facing it at home?
Not yet, but I feel like it's just around the corner.
Getting there.
I'm making my notes.
All right. Yeah. So, reduce words is definitely important because we do love talking as parents, and I must accept that because I'm also tempted to get into long lectures with my 7-year-old, so I can imagine what it must be with older kids, right? E stands for embrace emotion and empathize. We are also very, very tempted to say that, इतनी सी बात, only that much. Is that what is bothering you? Your facial expression itself conveys to them that it is not something that he should be bothered with. But ek ne, for example, Arey, that is a part of growing up. Yeah, why are you bothered? But no, the child is bothered. It's the world for him. His face must not look like it is looking right now. So, it's good to empathize. It's good to ask. It's good to say that I can see you're worried about it. How do you want me to help you? It might be overwhelming sometimes. Yes. You know what, parents? Peers can be very cruel sometimes. They are very spontaneous. They are very natural. They have, no filters when they speak. So when they're speaking to each other, social media comments, they can be very, very damaging sometimes to your self-esteem. And I'm sure, Devasmita, you must have also had a lot of such clients who've been damaged by certain comments. Would you like to share anything on this point with us?
Oh, several. In fact, it's one of the things that I wanted to bring up maybe a little bit later is the sensitivity that teenagers have about themselves. And I think it comes from that whole idea that their identity is sort of, again, taking shape during these years. So anything that is said to them, social media or otherwise, which they would probably laugh off when they were 10 years old, now suddenly lands like a bomb,
Right.
and it throws them off, and it throws you off as well as a parent, because you were always joking like this earlier, and now suddenly what happened? So a
Correct.
remark about how they're looking, and just a friendly one even, can really disturb them. And that's just friendly remarks. When you go into peer interactions and social media, that's another different world altogether, where a lot of the times it is really nasty.
Absolutely.
And while maybe for us it's easier to brush it aside and say, oh, it's just virtual reality, but for them it's really a huge part of their world.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. So they are
So
they are the digital natives, as they say.
mhm.
Probably a step further because digital natives have also grown up now.
Mm.
But which makes me feel very old, yeah.
You would be
All
both.
right. Yeah. But then when you were saying this, I was also thinking about how basically they feel very, very intensely about their looks, about their, not everybody. And many a times, parents do tell me that, oh, but no, 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 she is not like that. She is not someone who will get disturbed by this. Because all this while, the child was really not getting upset by these comments. But as they grow, they change. And these changes might be undescribable, they might be unfathomable for us, and therefore unbelievable for many parents. But yes, the emotions, the way they feel emotion, some shut it off. Some just want to brush it aside. They don't like showing their emotions, right? They feel awkward when it comes to expression of emotions. So most teens will, brush you aside, push you away, and say, no, no, don't do this to me. You're not allowed to hug them or kiss them or say a goodbye to them or even show yourself in front of their friends. It's not allowed, right? Yes, but it's important for us to understand the emotion. So your child needs your love the most when he least deserves it. I don't know. I happened to read this somewhere. Is it Irma Bombeck or someone? I don't remember clearly. But when your child is misbehaving, when your child is shutting you off, being violent or being angry or abusing you verbally, or saying, "I don't want you in my life," the rejection bit. That's when that's when your child needs your love the most, when he appears to not deserve it, right? So it's very important for us to empathize, to embrace the emotion, and sometimes describe the emotion or describe what they are doing. You should come out. You should sit on the dinner table with us. You must talk to us. The teen has switched off. The teen has not listened to a word, just brushed it aside with an, you know, shake of his head and disregarded what you've said completely. Rather, I notice you spend a lot of time in your room. I wonder what you're thinking about. I wonder what you're doing inside. Questions, describe. I know, I can empathize with the parents because they say they don't want to talk to us. And yes, that's a reality. Teens do not want to talk to their parents. They like being in their own world, but at the same time, we cannot give up. We've got to try and invade into those shells to bring them out of it, right? So it's always good to not ask or not tell what you expect, but describe. Describe their behavior, describe what they are saying, describe the situation. There might be complaints from the school, and then you sit across the table as equals, very important, and talk to them that, we've got this specific problem on hand. You've been caught the fifth time with a phone in your hand when the class was going on, and this is what the principal has to say. What do you think? How can we solve this problem? And why do you do this? Is this why I've given you the phone? You've always done this to me. I had to leave my important meeting and go there. You're just informing your team that the meeting was more important than him. However unreasonable his behavior has been, that's the message the child's going to catch. Unfortunately, so yes, the world's tilted on the children's side, the world's biased, and that's how it is, and it's going to be a little unfair for parents. But uh, in such situations, it's important that we treat them as equals. We describe the problem, the situation, the feeling, the behavior to them, and not preach, right? Any thoughts, Debismita?
No agreement again, Anagha. I was just while you were speaking, something came to my mind. I think one of the best things that my father had told me growing up during the teenage years was that it doesn't matter what you've done, even if you have done something that you think is horrible, you think like there is no coming back from it. I'm the person you come and tell. I'll always be there. I'll always be at your side. Yes, I might punish you later, but I will support you through that, right? And when you were talking about involving and getting into their shell and trying to understand them, it just came back to me that that reassurance, I think, speaks louder, very few words, but it speaks so loudly of the empathy.
Yes.
That okay, I understand that you're a teenager, you might be tempted to do crazy things and land yourself in trouble, but I'm here. So again, not very preachy, but at the same time supportive. And yeah, I
Very
think that
practical
was very
too.
helpful, very practical too. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So, you know what? I think that is important. The realization that I've got a combustible, if I can use the word, a person in my home and who might end up uh, getting his tail on fire, I've got the person to extinguish the fire. And that is very important. The expectation that your teens will always want to cross that line, will always want to push the boundaries a little more and try those crazy things, um, is important. The realization that it may happen, it can happen, and it's absolutely normal to happen
Mhm.
is something that will prepare us to handle it when it actually happens. If it doesn't, you're one of the lucky parents. But here and there, we will toe the line, we will go across it, and we will, because we're trying to establish the boundaries for ourselves. So we are going to try and test each and every person around us. You were saying something.
It just leaves that one channel out of that shell. Even when you are feeling guilty and you do have a conscience, even as a teenager, you do realize that okay, now I've really crossed my boundaries, done something terrible, which as an adult we know isn't really that big, but to the teenager's mind it seems like the end of the world. But it leaves that one window open to come back to the parents, to come back to
Absolutely.
safety.
Absolutely. And
And
after having, yes,
mhm,
yes, Debasmita, go ahead.
I was just saying that this is something that, it's a window that takes years to create, years to build, and it comes in handy in these years, in the teenage years, adolescence, even as an adult, right? So, as soon, even if your children are not adolescents yet, the sooner you can start, you know, creating this window and leave it wide open, because you
Absolutely.
will need it when your children are adolescents.
True, true. And since we've already had a session on positive discipline, I'm not going to get into it. But when you do come across these crazy things, um, it's important that we don't hand out punitive measures, but take some corrective actions, which involves the child, involves the teen into the process. And that should help. Again, when you were talking about what advice your father had given you, I remember something that my parents told me, which came handy to me. It was like almost a litmus test. All right, so you could talk about this to your children, your teens as well, that when you're doing something, if there is some fear of, how am I going to justify this at home, then that means it's something that is across the line. Because if you have that fear, your inner voice is very important. Your inner voice will always tell you what's right and what's wrong. And when your inner voice tells you you're wrong, that's when you feel the fear. So, it's almost like a litmus test. Whatever you do, if you think I'm going to be able to justify this at home and they're not going to be upset about it, then that means you're on the right direction. But if you have that inkling, it means your inner voice is there, just that you don't want to hear it. So, it's important that we teach our teens to hear that inner voice, which will definitely guide them, because parents trust the values that you have given your children as children. So now is the time when they're going to experiment with those values and see for themselves if they are right or wrong. So they will have fallouts, they will have failures, they will toe across the line. But I'm sure with the right kind of values and the right kind of counsel, they will probably find themselves back on track in no time. So, yes, uh, which brings me to the next point, involve them in corrective measures. It's important that we sit across, talk to them as adults, make them, party to it, make them understand that there is an ownership that is attached to it. Their actions will have a consequence, and that consequence is going to affect them more than the family, more than the school, more than the other entities that are around them. It's going to be damaging for them if they engage in unhelpful behaviors. So it's important that we involve them in corrective measures and say, we're going to do this. Do you agree? Or what do you suggest? Tell us how to solve this problem. What is your perspective on it? Right? And then reframe no's. If your parenting style is tight, watered, and there is no space for flexibility, then your teens want to start hiding things from you because they want to do what they want to do and they want to try everything out in life. It's important that we reframe the no's with, let me think about it. Why is it so important for you to go to this particular concert? Why is it so important to you to go to that friend's farmhouse? What are your plans? Right? So reframing those no's with things that, when I was your age, I was not even allowed to go to a movie. That's your woe, not your child's woe. And the teen's not going to relate to it. It does not resonate with your child because he's just going to think that his grandparents were way too orthodox and they were worse off than his parents, because he already thinks that you are orthodox or you are limited, restricted. And then you are going to uh, create that um, you know feeling in your child that my household is limiting me, my household is restrictive, whereas the family is the place where he should feel welcomed and supported. All right. So it's important that we reframe our no's into, let's talk about it, let's think about it, tell me why is it so important to you, how does it matter, or why does it matter so much? All right, I want to understand. Help me understand. I'm not questioning you, but help me understand why is it so important, right? Um, E stands for emphasize the positive. Try to locate that slight silver lining in the craziest of behaviors. I'm glad you did this and not that. It's good for the children to know what is appreciated. It's good for the teens to understand what is to be repeated. So when you emphasize the positive in them, they will have a sense of fulfillment. Their self-esteem gets boosted. And then they understand, oh, this is the type of activity or behavior that is expected of me, and that's going to give me some positive strokes and positive vibes by people who matter to me the most. Yes, you may not believe me, parents. Your child's behavior may not show it to you, but you are the people who matter to them the most. Because let's remember, they're still children. They're still children, right? So it's important for us to emphasize the positives in the child. I'm so glad, like Debasmita said, if a child has really gone back to his parents and said, listen, I messed up, I've cheated in the exam, I'm so glad you've come and told this to me honestly. Yes, it does seem like a big problem. Let's sit down and talk about it. How can we take any corrective action over it? Yes? Resonates, Debasmita?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I do have a few questions, but I'll let you finish and then maybe come back with them.
Sure, sure. We then move on to creativity, and I would like to emphasize creatively and collaboratively solve the conflict. There will be conflicts. We cannot avoid conflicts, right? We might want to be very friendly, but we also have to remember that we are not their friends, and we should not be their friends. We should only be friendly. Okay, because we cannot replace their friends and nobody else can replace their parents. So it's important that we are the ones who draw the line. We have given them access to the wi-fi, we have given them the gadgets, we have the ownership to the gadgets. So we just cannot have them dictate their terms to us and damage their health. You would not allow your child to, you had a bad day, come sit, let's have a peg. We won't do that, right? So let's not do that with the gadgets too, because research shows, and I'm sure Debasmita will agree with me, she also will have gone through such articles which say that studies show that the effect of the kick that you get after consumption of alcohol or a puff of a cigarette is the same kick that you receive when you're gaming or using a gadget or playing on a video game, right? So it's very important for us to understand, where is it that I draw the line. I'm going to be the provider, I'm going to give you everything, but everything comes with a cost, and everything comes with a sense of responsibility and rules. So you have the freedom, but freedom has a price to pay for, and that is responsibility, which is extremely important. So, creatively and collaboratively solve the conflict as much as possible. It might take time, it might take patience, it might uh, be, dotted with several of those meltdowns and blow ups. But that's our best choice, right? It's the best way to go. And the last point is to teach mindfulness and model it. When we practice calm, when we show how we handle our problems, when we show them how we handle our emotions, they have made us extremely upset and we are very angry. If we scream and storm at them, then we actually have no ground to tell them not to do it. So it's very, very important. It's very stressful. It's very overwhelming. And we parenting is just one role that we are playing. So we are also having tremendously stressful other roles to play. So I completely empathize with the parents. It is a tightrope walk, not only a tightrope walk over a pit of fire, maybe, right? Because you can't slip here, you can't slip there, right? But it's it is that difficult, and I validate it, I empathize with it. Yet that's our best way, because if we, showcase um, ups and downs in our behavior, we are going to teach that to the children, because they don't listen, they imitate us. Teens don't listen to us. Children don't listen to us. They imitate us. They do what they see. They imbibe what they see around them. And therefore, it's important that we take mindful decisions. that we model confidence, we model calmness, we model the clarity of mind, the practicality of situations where we sit down and solve problems one to one like adults. And that's going to teach your child how to address a problem, how to address a conflict. So, if you practice that enough and you expose them to these experiences, what are you basically doing when you are conversing with them? We are empathizing with the emotion and saying, okay, I understand. But now we have to move towards solution oriented conversations, solution oriented thinking. And when you model it, when you do it with your children, that particular incident, that particular experience creates the neural connections from the forebrain to the hindbrain, from the hindbrain to the forebrain. And that's how you integrate the brain, right? So, redirecting to logic is doing all those things to be able to create those pathways which the child can then exploit in a state of high emotion and ensure, or at least understand, that this is a state of high emotion. I can't think clearly now. Let me wait for the emotion to subside and then take a rational decision. And then you've won your battle. If that much awareness is there, that's enough, because we cannot avoid high emotions, can we? As adults, also, we cannot avoid high emotions. We will, feel those emotions, and we will have to wait for the wave to subside before we can think with clarity and take an informed and rational decision. Yes, Devasmita, you've unmuted yourself.
Yes, that in fact brings me to a question that we have, as parents. As much as we say that we need to hold space for our child's emotion, it's also very distressing to see your child go through some intense, especially negative emotion, right? And with the number of, depression in teenage, children, or anxiety rising, it's an increasingly common experience for parents to see their children suffer,
Absolutely.
even if it isn't a diagnosable disorder, but significant distress, let's say, right? And there is this impulse to want to fix it,
Yes.
right? So I feel like you have touched upon this before as well, but it's never enough to emphasize on this. How do we deal with intense negative emotions that our children are experiencing, which naturally bothers us?
Right. So I would like to say something here. If these emotions are behavior, and that is extreme withdrawal, weight gain or weight loss, overuse of gadgets or excessive screen time, erratic sleep patterns, erratic eating patterns, um, a marked anxiety in performing, peer isolation, then I think we must reassure our child or teen and ensure that he or she gets expert help, because sometimes everything is not possible to do as a parent, because you're a parent, you're not a mental health expert. So when there are emotional upheavals beyond a certain point, it is mandatory that we convince our children and bring them into the counselor's room. I face a lot of these issues where parents tell me, he is not ready to come. Will you please guide us on how to handle him? It is possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's only going to be effective to a certain extent. But when it is time for a injection or vaccination or a treatment, no one is saying this, that they're not ready to come. So, somewhere I think it's also required for parents in such cases to be a little firm and say, nothing doing. I am feeling very concerned about you, and you must come with me and see someone. And at least get the child, even if reluctantly, into the room and get him to meet someone. And that will probably help the child understand that there is a way of solving the problems that he or she is facing. But on the other hand, what to do? Um, ensure that you are reassuring your child. Ensure that you're keeping the communication patterns open, channels open, and ensure that your child feels that support and opens up to you. But if that's not happening, and there is sudden acute changes in behavior, it is mandatory for parents to ensure that they take their teens before it's too late to someone who can help them as a family also. There are many people who use the family centered approach where the entire family is spoken to. And this is seen more also, Debasmita, in case of children who have high emotional needs. See, emotional being high on emotional needs doesn't mean I am a weak person, right? And that is something that is the stigma that we are all struggling to break. And I'm sure you'll agree with me on this.
Oh, absolutely. I also wanted to touch upon briefly, since we're seeing so many conversations around being neurodivergent or being queer, especially around this time of the year. Um, I wanted to, wanted you to know your thoughts, because this is also the time when they are sort of coming to terms with their own sexuality or
Yes.
with their gender, their orientation, all of those things, right? And that can involve some intense emotions and along with shame, right? So when you were talking about trust your values, I was sort of finding some contradictions in my mind, because there could be some families where the values are very different from what the child is experiencing or what their world around is. There could be a huge gap. I'm sorry, there's so much traffic. I hope
No, you're audible.
okay. um, so the value system at home, the ecosystem there could be very different from the one that the child is exposed to, and they could feel this huge gap. That's one.
Yes.
And the other
Yes.
thing is, of course, when they are themselves coming to terms with the fact that they are not aligned with their families or parents views when it comes to gender and sexuality and these things. How does a parent help their child, you know
Tough
face this,
question.
deal with this? Very tough, I know, but it's also very real.
It is, it is, it is very real.
Mm.
But in such situations, what I see is there is no self denial in teens. They are very clear, and they have, understood by whatever they have exposed themselves to, and they've made up their mind that this is what I am. What bothers them is not their identity, but what bothers them is how my parents are going to take this. And that is extremely unsettling for a teenager, for a young person to feel this. It's very unsettling. But if your teen does come to you and speak about such things, it's very important that you do not reject it. Do not say aisa kuch nahi hai. Do not say you're too far too young to understand all these things. Do not say, wait, maybe you'll change your mind. Do not say this is not the right time. Say, is this what you feel? Help me understand. Tell me more about. Get all the information that your teen can offer you, and get yourself some help to be able to understand how to deal with a teen who comes to you with such things, because these are across the lines things. These are not really some things that fall into everyday. I would not say normal. I'm very cautious. I would not say they fall out of the normal. They are not usual. They are not everyday things. They are not things that we have dealt with as, we've not seen our parents deal with it. We've not dealt with it. We don't have a lot of, um, what can I say, examples to borrow
Precedent,
from.
yeah.
Yes, to borrow from. So it is important that we ourselves take help and understand from an expert how it feels, what it
Mm.
feels, and how can I best support my child through this.
Absolutely. I think getting more information, finding out about your child's reality, about their world, whether fear or not. Another thing that comes to my mind, and this is purely from having spoken to adults who have had to have this conversation with their parents sometime in their teenage years. What stood out for me is that they were not expecting to be fully accepted right away.
Right. They
They
expect.
were fully expecting that you will have some reservations, about it. You may not be thrilled about it. But the only expectation is that you don't reject them because of
Absolutely,
what they
yes.
are sharing. So if you can just keep that bit in place, like don't reject them, but you can take your time to warm up to the concept, to warm up to the idea that, okay, my child is very different. This is not what I was expecting. This is not what I've seen in my something I've seen in my community. All of those
Absolutely.
things are fine as long as you don't reject your child outright.
Absolutely. So rejection, disregard, denial is something that they fear in their parents. So we may be shocked, we may not be able to come to terms with it immediately, but that's okay. They expect that from you. But what they do not expect or they fear from the bottoms of their heart is your rejection, right? All right, so with that, let us move on to the last bit. The benefits of adopting an integrated approach is your children will become improve at decision making. They will improve at decision making. They will have better control of body and emotions, a fuller understanding of self, and better self regulation strategies, because now you have created those neural pathways in their brains which help them to connect the emotional brain and the rational brain. It will also definitely lead to stronger and more meaningful relationships. See, the key is only to allow the amygdala to cool down and put its revolver down. If we are able to wait and not act until that happens and hold on to that impulse, we've done it. And if you're able to, plant this habit or plant this coping mechanism in your child will definitely, your teen will definitely have a more strong and meaningful relationships, whether professional or personal, as also scholastic and academic success and success in future career wise is also known to be better by research when this kind of an approach has been adopted, right? So that brings me to the end of this maybe presentation, I can call it. And if there are any more questions, we are open to it.
I have a thought, and borrowing from Daniel Siegel here, who's a very, very renowned author and a psychologist who's written a lot on parenting. So, in one of his books, which is called Parenting Inside Out, he writes that if you have blocked some of your own emotions, because of maybe
Various
lack of
reasons.
empathy, various reasons, trauma, whatever, you will not be able to hold space for that same emotion in your child, right? So Parenting Inside Out is a wonderful read, and it talks about how you need to face your own skeletons in the closet, your own emotions that you have put away for some reason, for you to be able to hold space or even truly empathize with your child. So
Absolutely. And that also reminds me, there's another book by the same author, titled, I think, The Whole Brain Parenting or something like that,
parenting,
where
yeah.
there are 12 strategies. And one very important strategy from there is use it or lose it. So when your child comes to you with any opening conversation statement, it's important that we optimize on that, because it's not every day that your teen's going to walk in and wanting to talk to you. So it's extremely important to catch on that situation and optimize and get into a conversation whenever there is misbehavior, undesirable behavior. Optimize on those situations to instill the right kind of life skills at that given point of time. Strike the iron when it is hot, as they say.
Absolutely. One last question, Anagha, and I think this will sort of tie together several things you said before. So, in parents nowadays, and mostly because we are nuclear families with just one child in the house, naturally the child is the center of everyone's attention, right? We want to make the
Yes.
world very comfortable. We don't want our child to be unhappy, right? So there's a certain amount of indulgent parenting that's quite common these days,
Yes.
and what happens again is that when you when you see your child experience something unpleasant, maybe a little bullying, maybe a little rejection from friends, and I'm talking about experiences which are not in the range of very distressing or traumatic, but mildly distressing, right? There is a tendency again in parents to just fix it, to
Yes,
correct it, right? And to make the experience of growing up absolutely wonderful, like an Instagram, movie with lots of filters. What do you have to say about that? So while we're talking about, letting them, holding space for their emotions and all of that, there's also that other end of things where we want to ensure that they only feel positive emotions, only feel positive vibes. In fact, I see this so often, positive vibes only. And I wonder how, how unrealistic that is to teach your child to sort of, or rather create a world for them where there are only positive emotions, right? So
absolutely.
what do you have to say about that?
If you create a world with only positive things in it, the child, when finally steps into the real world, is going to come crashing down, because you have only given, it's like, making a child look at videos and read books on swimming and never allowing the child to get into water. So it's not going to help. It's extremely damaging, because if you don't teach your child, in fact, um, there is this interesting story. It's kind of a funny story that I read. Obviously it's not something that has happened to someone, but it's like this little child's parents would tell him that, you sing so well, because the child used to love singing. And the child's parents kept saying that, oh, you're a wonderful singer, you're a wonderful singer. And one fine day, this child participates in a singing competition and makes a complete fool of himself and comes crashing down. So you've got to be realistic. You've got to give them healthy criticism. They've got to know how to handle criticism, because the world's going to throw trash at them when they grow up, right? And it's not very practical for us to mollycoddle them, because then we're not toughening them up properly, and they need to be toughened up to face the world. So only positive emotions is only going to make them more and more scared of negative emotions. Whereas you cannot avoid negative emotions, you cannot avoid problems, you cannot avoid disappointments. I see this a lot, when a toy breaks, you tell your child, with younger children, of course, dusra aa jayega. But it's okay. Then you're disregarding the emotion again. See, we're talking about not disregard, embrace the emotion. The child is feeling sad, disappointed, hurt that this has happened. When a child falls down, we, say we get up and we kick the ground. Isne giraya, isne mara, isne lagaya. We are just taking away the ownership. You were not watching, you fell down. It's your ownership. It happens. Get up. If you don't allow them to fall, they're going to fall a big way later. So you've got to, this is their safest experiment ground. Yeah. Your
Absolutely.
home is their safest experiment ground. Let them experiment, let them fall, teach them to get up, because that's what's going to keep them going later.
Completely agree with you. In fact, on a funny note, I remember an incident where a parent, when I pointed out that, maybe this is a little indulgent, maybe you need to let your child experience some of the negative emotions. Otherwise, how will they learn how to cope with them?
Hmm.
And this parent said to me in Hindi that, क्या करे एक ही बच्चा है ना, तो बहुत बुरा लगता है, इसीलिए हम थोड़ा उसको बहुत बहुत केयरफुल, very protective parents is what they
Indulgent.
wanted to say. And an afterthought I had was that, well, if you had 5 kids, you could spoil one and let one, be indulged and not prepared for life. But you have only one, right? So all the more reason for you to make
But
sure that your child is prepared
absolutely. And what I would like to tell these parents is, he is the only one for you, but he's not the only one in the world out
out
there.
there. Yeah,
He's going to have to compete with millions of his age for everything, for a
absolutely.
job, for a seat, for a this, for a that. So, you've got to get them world ready. Yeah. You can't make them sit on cushions, and it's just not possible unless you are a Maharaja of
You
some
can't,
country.
yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Anagha. This was, insightful as ever. And again, some really, really golden nuggets, as I keep saying. One that we've been, I think, talking about in every session is that you're a friendly parent, you're not a friend, right? And another one that personally resonates with me a lot is the whole redirect bit. Redirect, teach them how to think with compassion, with empathy, learn, be corrective when you need to. But I think what stands out is again the balance of it all, right? That do it in a way that's balanced so that you are able to show them the right path, give them the right values, stay empathetic, at the same time prepare them for life ahead.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
So
Totally agree. Thank you so much, Debasmita. It's always a learning experience. Yes, I'm here to facilitate, but through our conversations, there's so much more learning and perspectives that come in, and it's always enriching. Thank you so much.
it's always a delight. Thank you. Thank you for joining today. And to all of you watching us, thank you for watching this. And we will come back again next Friday with another episode of the Parent-Adolescent Project. We keep talking about adolescent issues and parenting challenges that many of us face. So do stay tuned. And for all of you who are watching this, please know that Mana Wellness is here to support you and your child through this journey. So do reach out if you need help of any sort. Thank you. See you again.
Hi. I have a question. Can I put it to you now?
Um, yes. Anagha, would you be okay taking one
Yeah, yeah,
question?
yes,
Yeah,
yes. Go
Yeah,
sure,
ahead.
just
Radha, go ahead.
one quick question. Like you said, we see this day in and out that kids are not willing to talk much to the parents, and they like to stick to themselves, and they want their space. Understanding all of that, and even though we try to engage kids in conversation, they do not talk beyond a certain point. So, do we just give up, and say, okay, probably my kid is a man of few words, and he's not going to talk beyond this. He's just going to answer in monosyllables, yes or no. So, I mean, do we just give up there, or is there a way we can work around this?
Okay, so like I said, it's important that we keep striking those conversations. Do not
Mm,
expect much. Lower your expectations. Monosyllabic answers are answers still, and you're able to keep the conversation going some way, this way or that way. It's also good to talk to them about their interests. Ask them about things that they know and you don't. Make them your teachers, and ensure something that they share something that enlightens you. Get tech help from them. Okay, those are the areas on which you can strike those conversations. And even if they don't go the way you expect them to go, don't give up. Keep going, because that's the way you can show your interest in what in their lives. All right, so there will come a time when they will come up and talk to you. They will definitely turn up when they need you. All right, so we must be ready, and like I said, use it or lose it when they come.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
beautifully said,
Welcome,
Anagha. Thank you so much. Thank you, Radha, for the question. And once again, thank you, Anagha. I think we're over time, so we will close for today. Bye bye.
bye bye. Thank you. Bye. See you.